Keanu Reeves had abandoned the orphaned child in the biting cold, her tiny body shivering in the frozen night air, the distant sounds of howling winds masking her cries. He had walked away, despite hearing her desperation, despite knowing she was alone. The silence of his decision hung heavy in his chest, a decision he would regret but could never undo. What had made him turn away? Was it fear of facing her pain, or a deeper fear of what he might become if he helped? What was the cost of this choice, both for him and for her? And would he ever have the chance to make things right? Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel because tomorrow we'll have another special story just for you. Keanu Reeves walked down the quiet street, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, the soft sound of his footsteps the only thing breaking the silence. It was a rare day off, one he'd stolen away from his hectic schedule. The world of flashing cameras, interviews, and movie sets had become overwhelming, and today, he needed to escape it all. He found solace in the peace of the early morning, when most of the world was still asleep. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow on the empty sidewalks. He took in the calmness of the street. No rush, no noise, just the quiet hum of the city waking up. Keanu had always preferred these moments of stillness, far from the world of fame and attention. He had learned long ago that being in the spotlight wasn't always what it appeared to be. Beneath the surface, he was just a man, trying to find his place in a chaotic world. As he strolled down the sidewalk, lost in his thoughts, something caught his eye. At the corner of a narrow alley, sitting against the cold brick wall, was a small figure huddled on the ground. A girl. Her clothes were ragged, her hair tangled and unkempt. She was no older than 10 or 11, her face pale and worn with the exhaustion of the streets. Keanu slowed his pace, his gaze softening as he observed her. She didn't look up at first, but as he passed by, their eyes met. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a brief connection. Her eyes, wide and searching, locked onto his with a mixture of hope and desperation. Keanu's heart twinged with a familiar pang, a feeling that he had experienced many times before, the helplessness of seeing someone in need and not knowing how to help. He knew that look, the one that asked for help but didn't quite dare to ask. Without thinking, she extended a small, trembling hand, her voice barely audible. "Spare a dollar?" Keanu hesitated. His instincts told him to stop, to do something, but a moment of uncertainty lingered. He looked at the girl, her face so small against the harshness of the world, and felt a wave of compassion wash over him. But something else held him back, something deeper, more personal. He glanced away, his heart heavy. He moved on, his steps growing slower, the sound of the girl's soft plea lingering in the air. It wasn't that he didn't want to help. It was something else, a quiet internal struggle that he couldn't quite explain. And as he disappeared down the street, the girl's outstretched hand remained in the air, waiting for a response that would never come. Keanu walked on, his thoughts clouded with a mix of emotions. He had wanted to help the girl, he really had, but something inside him had made him turn away. His mind replayed the brief encounter, her outstretched hand, the quiet desperation in her eyes. He couldn't help but wonder what had led her to that corner, alone and vulnerable. What had broken her spirit? What had brought her to this point? But as much as he wanted to answer those questions, he couldn't bring himself to stop. The city around him continued to wake up, the sounds of early morning commuters filling the air. Keanu tried to shake the heaviness in his chest, but it lingered. He wasn't used to feeling this way, guilty, conflicted. It was a strange sensation for someone who had lived most of his life in the public eye, used to being the center of attention, to people constantly asking for his help, his time. But this situation felt different. This girl felt different. His thoughts drifted back to the girl as he walked. She had looked so small, so lost. There was a rawness in her expression that was impossible to ignore. A part of him felt foolish for not stopping, for not offering her the little help she had asked for. What if it had been the one moment where his small act of kindness could have made a difference? What if she had been waiting for someone to notice, someone to show her that the world still had good people in it? Keanu stopped walking and turned back, his feet carrying him toward the street corner once more. His heart raced with uncertainty, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do something. He reached the alley again, but the girl was no longer there. His eyes scanned the area, but she had vanished, leaving only the memory of her small, hopeful hand outstretched and the faint echo of her voice asking for help. He stood there for a moment, the weight of the situation sinking in. It was too late. He had missed his chance. The girl was gone, and he could only hope that, wherever she was, she would find the help she needed. The girl's name was Lily. She hadn't always been on the streets. There had been a time when she was just like any other child, playing in the sun, laughing with her parents, and dreaming of the future. Her life had been filled with warmth, love, and the safety of a home that any child could hope for. But all of that changed in an instant. It was a rainy evening when the accident happened. Her mother and father had been on their way back from a family dinner, laughing together as they drove through the wet streets. Lily had been at home, waiting for them to return, eagerly anticipating the bedtime stories her mother always told. But that night, the storybook never came. A collision, the screeching of tires, the sound of metal twisting and breaking, the crash that shattered everything. Lily had no memory of what happened next, only that she was suddenly alone, standing in the doorway of her home, her small hand gripping the frame as she stared at the flashing lights outside. Her parents were gone, taken in an instant, and with them, her world. In the weeks that followed, Lily was sent to live with distant relatives, but they weren't prepared for a child, and their home was never truly hers. They tried their best, but the house was cold, the people were distant, and Lily felt like a stranger in her own life. Her mind often wandered back to her parents' laughter, to the warmth of their love, but it was only a memory now, a fading echo of what once was. Eventually, the loneliness became too much. She ran away, deciding that the streets were better than the empty house that was no longer home. She learned quickly that survival wasn't easy, that kindness was scarce and trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. But the streets taught her how to endure. They taught her how to blend into the background, how to keep her head down and avoid the eyes of people who might hurt her or worse, ignore her completely. Each day was a battle, each night a question of where she would sleep. Her body grew thinner, her face more hollow with each passing day, but her spirit, though bruised, never fully broke. She had to keep moving, keep going. The world, as cruel as it was, had never offered her a place to belong. So she learned to make do, to scrape by with what little she had. And in that struggle, she found a kind of resilience that no one could take from her. Lily's days on the street were spent in a haze of survival. Every morning, she would wake up in a different place, sometimes under a bridge, sometimes in an alley behind a restaurant, but always with the same gnawing sense of hunger and cold that never seemed to leave her. The world seemed to pass her by, indifferent and unaware of the little girl struggling to find a place in it. She had learned to scavenge, to rely on whatever the world would give her. Empty cans, discarded food, anything that could provide a few crumbs of sustenance. Sometimes, people would offer her a little spare change, but most of the time, they just ignored her, avoiding her gaze as if her very presence was an inconvenience. The coldness of their indifference stung more than the physical hunger she felt. But Lily had become used to it. She had learned to disappear, to fade into the background, to keep her head down and avoid being noticed. She knew the risks of drawing attention to herself. The streets were full of dangers, people who would take advantage of a vulnerable girl, who would hurt her without hesitation. She had seen it happen to others, and the fear of becoming another victim kept her moving, kept her alert. Despite the hardship, there were moments when Lily would catch glimpses of kindness. A passing stranger who would smile, a warm meal shared with another homeless person. These fleeting moments of humanity felt like a lifeline, even though they were few and far between. They reminded her that the world wasn't all bad, that somewhere, people still cared. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Lily grew more hardened, her face becoming a mask of survival. Her childhood, the one she had once known, seemed like a distant dream, something that belonged to someone else. But inside, deep down, a part of her still held onto the hope that one day, someone would see her, would notice her, and offer her a chance to escape this endless cycle of pain and loneliness. But for now, she kept moving. She learned to read people, to recognize the subtle signs of danger, to know when to run and when to stay still. She learned to sleep with one eye open, listening to the sounds of the street, footsteps, car horns, and the occasional shout. She learned to keep her thoughts to herself, to lock away the pain, to hold her emotions in check. The streets demanded toughness, and toughness was all she had left. There were nights when she would curl up in the corner of an alley, staring up at the stars, wondering if her parents were out there somewhere, watching over her. She could still remember the sound of her mother's voice, the warmth of her father's embrace, and for a brief moment, she would let herself believe that they hadn't truly gone, that one day, they would come back and take her home. But the days would pass, and reality would set in again. She was alone, and the streets were her home now, for better or worse. It had been a few days since Keanu had walked past the girl on the corner of the street. He had tried to put her out of his mind, to focus on the distractions that came with his life. Meetings, scripts, interviews. But the truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Her face, those eyes, haunted him in ways he didn't fully understand. There was something about her that felt familiar, a sense of emptiness that echoed within him, pulling at something deep in his heart. Keanu found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying their brief encounter. Her outstretched hand, her quiet voice asking for $1, her eyes that held so much pain. He couldn't get the image out of his mind. It was as if the world had opened up for a moment, allowing him to see her in all her vulnerability. And he had turned away. He had done the same thing before, walking past people on the street, avoiding the discomfort of truly seeing their struggles. It was easier that way, wasn't it? To keep moving, to pretend that you didn't notice the suffering around you, to focus on the things that mattered in your own world. But something had shifted in him after meeting the girl. He couldn't just keep walking past her. That night, after another restless evening, Keanu made a decision. He would go back. He didn't know what he would do when he found her, but he knew that he couldn't leave her out there, alone, in the cold. He owed her that much, didn't he? To at least try. The next morning, Keanu found himself on the same street corner, the one where he had first seen Lily. He had no idea if she would be there, if she would even remember him, but he felt a strange pull, as though something beyond him was guiding his steps. The street was busy with the usual hustle and bustle of the city, but Keanu's eyes were searching, scanning the crowd for any sign of the girl. He walked up and down the sidewalk, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, but the minutes dragged on with no luck. Doubt began to creep in. What if she had moved on? What if she didn't need help anymore? What if it was too late? The thought gnawed at him, making him wonder if he had made a mistake in coming back. Just as he was about to turn around and give up, he saw her. She was sitting on the same street corner, her back pressed against the brick wall of a nearby building, her head tucked down as she tried to shield herself from the wind. Her clothes were tattered, and her hair was tangled, but there she was, Lily. Keanu's heart tightened at the sight of her, the same mixture of guilt and compassion rising up inside him. He walked slowly toward her, unsure of what to say or how to approach. When he was just a few feet away, he stopped and hesitated. She hadn't seen him yet, and for a moment, Keanu considered walking away, disappearing back into the crowd. But he couldn't. He cleared his throat softly. "Hey," he said, his voice gentle but unsure. Are you all right?" Lily looked up, her eyes blinking against the sunlight. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. But then her expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. The stranger from before. "I'm sorry I didn't stop before. I should have helped." Lily stared at him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly as if weighing his words. She had learned long ago not to trust people who suddenly decided to show kindness. It was usually temporary, fleeting, just a gesture to make someone feel better about themselves. But there was something in Keanu's eyes, something different. Maybe it was the way he had come back for her, the way he wasn't trying to rush away or fix her, just acknowledging her presence. After a long silence, she spoke again, her voice soft but tinged with uncertainty. "Why are you back?" Keanu paused, not sure how to answer. I don't know," he admitted. "I just felt like I couldn't leave you there." Lily looked down, pulling her knees closer to her chest. She didn't want to get her hopes up. She had been let down too many times before. But there was something in Keanu's demeanor that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't like the others. "I don't need charity," she muttered, though her words were less forceful than before. Keanu smiled softly, understanding the defense she had built around herself. "I'm not offering charity," he said quietly. "I just want to help, if you'll let me." For the first time in what felt like forever, Lily felt the faintest spark of hope. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. And for now, that was enough. Over the next few weeks, Keanu and Lily spent more time together. What started as an act of kindness turned into something more profound. Keanu, who had spent most of his life surrounded by fame, money, and the luxury of living in his own world, found that helping Lily gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't realized he was missing. It was a strange feeling, seeing someone who had no one, no family, no home, and knowing that he could be the one to change that for her. Lily, too, had begun to let her guard down. The walls she had built around her heart were slowly beginning to crumble. Piece by piece, Keanu was different. He wasn't just a kind stranger. He was consistent, genuine. He showed up every day, offering her food, shelter, and most importantly, his time. It was a luxury Lily had never known. One evening, after they had shared a meal together at Keanu's home, he looked at her across the table. There was a hesitation in his eyes. "And about what you need." Lily stared at him, her fork paused in midair. She wasn't sure what to expect, but the last thing she was prepared for was what came next. "I want to adopt you," Keanu said, his voice steady, but there was a softness to it that made it seem almost vulnerable. "I want to give you a home, a family. I don't want you to live like this anymore." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She had never been offered something like this before, never even dared to dream that someone would care enough to give her the life she deserved. Her mind raced, her emotions swirling as she tried to process the words he had just spoken. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you want to do that?" Keanu smiled, the warmth in his eyes making Lily feel like she was seeing him for the first time. "Because," he said softly, "you deserve a chance. You deserve more than what the world has given you so far." Lily looked down at her hands, the weight of his offer settling over her. She had never imagined a life like the one Keanu was offering her. But now, in the safety of his words, she began to see it as a possibility, something that could actually happen. She began, but her voice caught how to believe in it. But deep down, she knew this was the first real offer of hope she had ever had. Keanu reached across the table and gently took her hand in his. "It's okay," he said reassuringly. "You don't have to say yes right away. But I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Lily's eyes filled with tears as she looked up at him. She had never imagined that this kind of kindness could be real. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a home. The process of adoption was long and filled with paperwork, but to Lily, it felt like a dream unfolding before her eyes. She moved into Keanu's home, a place that felt warm and safe. Unlike the cold streets she had known, the transition wasn't easy. There were moments when she would slip into old habits, moments when she would feel like an intruder in this new life. But Keanu was patient, understanding. He never pushed her, never rushed her to adjust. He let her take her time. Slowly, Lily began to embrace her new life. She found comfort in the little things. Sitting at the dinner table with Keanu and eating a warm meal, watching movies together on the couch, and even doing the small tasks around the house that made her feel like she belonged. For the first time in years, she didn't have to worry about where she would sleep or where her next meal would come from. Keanu's house, once just a place to retreat from the world, now felt like a home. It wasn't just the physical space. It was the way he treated her, the way he made her feel like she was a part of something, that she mattered. For Lily, this was the greatest gift she had ever received. But it wasn't just the material things that made her life better. It was the love and care Keanu gave her. He listened to her when she needed to talk, offered advice when she asked, and always made sure she felt seen, heard, and valued. It was a stark contrast to the indifference she had grown used to on the streets. Lily allowed herself to hope, and that hope, small as it was enough to start rebuilding her life. Months passed, and Lily's life with Keanu had settled into a peaceful routine. She was doing well in school, enjoying the stability that came with having a home, and the love that Keanu showered on her. Still, there were moments when she felt like something was missing, but she couldn't quite figure out what it was. Maybe it was simply the feeling of not knowing who she truly was, who she had been before all this, before the streets and the pain. But it didn't matter much, because Keanu made her feel like she had everything she needed. One afternoon, Keanu invited Lily to join him in his study. He'd been working on something all morning. Walking over to it, Keanu smiled at her, a warm look in his eyes. "I've got something for you," he said, handing her the box. Lily looked at him, confused. "For me?" He nodded. "Yes. Open it." With shaking hands, Lily tore off the wrapping paper, revealing a small, elegant silver necklace. A simple, delicate piece with a small charm. A star, glowing faintly in the light. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized that this wasn't just a gift. It was something that meant more than she could put into words. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her fingers tracing the charm. Keanu chuckled softly. "I thought you'd like it. There's a special reason for it, though." Lily raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. "A reason?" Keanu stood up and walked to the bookshelf, pulling out a photo album. He opened it to a page near the back, where there were several old pictures of him, smiling, laughing with friends and family. But then, as he turned the page, Lily's eyes widened. There, on the next page, was a picture of a young girl with bright eyes and a shy smile. The girl was sitting in the grass, holding a stuffed bear. It was a picture of a time long ago, before everything changed. Lily's heart skipped a beat. The girl in the photo, it looked just like her. "That's me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's me when I was little." Keanu nodded, his face filled with emotion. "Yes, Lily, that's you. Before everything happened. Before you were lost." Lily sat down on the chair, the weight of the moment settling over her. She had never seen that picture before, never even known it existed. But there it was, right in front of her. It was her past, a part of her life that she had forgotten, hidden away in the shadows of pain and loss. "Why do you have this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Keanu took a deep breath, sitting next to her. "Because I knew you were lost, Lily, and I knew that one day you might need to find your way back. I kept this picture for you, for the day when you would be ready to remember who you are, to know that you were once a little girl with dreams, with hope." Lily looked at the necklace again, the star-shaped charm now feeling like a symbol of her past, a connection to the girl she used to be. She had spent so long trying to forget who she was, trying to move forward without looking back. But now, in this quiet moment, she realized that she didn't have to forget her past. It was a part of her, and it always would be. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at Keanu, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me this." Keanu smiled, his eyes soft with understanding. "You don't have to thank me, Lily. You're home now, and that's all that matters." As the years went by, Lily continued to thrive under Keanu's care. The bond they had formed only deepened, and they became inseparable. Keanu, who had once been a solitary figure in the spotlight, now found joy in the simple, quiet moments of fatherhood. He cherished every smile, every laugh, every milestone Lily reached. And Lily, who had once felt like an orphan of the world, now felt like she was part of something far greater than herself. On her 16th birthday, Keanu took her out for a special dinner, just the two of them. They had celebrated many milestones together, but this one felt different. It was a celebration not only of Lily's growth but of their shared journey. a journey that had started in the darkest of places and led them to a place of light, love, and belonging. As they sat at the table, Keanu raised his glass to her. "To you, Lily," he said, his voice full of pride. "You've grown into an incredible young woman, and I am so proud of everything you've become." Lily smiled, her eyes shining with love for him. "Thank you, Dad," she said, her voice steady and full of warmth. "I don't know where I would be without you." Keanu's heart swelled. "You don't have to worry about that anymore. You'll always have a place with me, Lily. Always." And in that moment, Lily realized that this was home. It wasn't the house, the school, or even the gifts Keanu had given her. It was the love they shared, the bond they had formed, the bond of a father and daughter, unbreakable and eternal. Years later, as she stood at the edge of the world, poised to step into the next chapter of her life, Lily knew one thing for certain. She was loved. And that love had carried her through the hardest of times. It had shaped her, molded her, and given her the strength to keep going. With Keanu by her side, Lily had found something she never thought possible, true happiness. And for that, she would be forever grateful.